Hello. I've been talking to people out here this morning as I've been getting ready to allay my nervousness, and I've been asking people, like, well, what has you come? Like, what has you get up at 5:30 in the morning and get dressed and come to a thing at 7? When she first said it was going to be at 7 in the morning, I was like, what? Like, I've heard after lunch is the bad speaking slot, but like, is 7 in the morning a good speaking slot? I don't know, I've never done it. So I asked people, what had you get here? And they said, Kath invited me. Like, that was the number one answer. Kath invited me. So there's something about community building happening here. And I'm curious to know, like, one of my questions this morning, which I invite you to hold with me, is, some of you know some people here, some of you don't know some people here. But what we do know is that this particular group here now have never been together before. First time this group of people been together in one place at one time, and you all came for some reason. And I'm making the assumption that there's a number of deeply held shared values that had you be here. And like, one person commented, I'm really enjoying being here. I don't know what it is. Usually I don't like these types of things, and something about this is feeling different. Seems like there's some more openness or more something. Anybody else had that sense as you kind of came in this morning? Yeah. So I'm excited to be here. I start off with a question. What do bungee jumping, meditation, ecstatic dance, LSD, musical jamming all have in common? Yeah, fun. Okay, good, fun. What else? I've tried them all.
People. Something to do with the mind.
Yeah, something to do with the mind. They all are ways to access what is being called recently as a flow state. How many of you have read the book or heard of the book Stealing Fire? Anybody? So, one, yes. So Stealing Fire, a group of people that were studying altered states and peak performance, the intersection between the two. And they studied Navy SEALs, and they studied elite sports teams, and they studied engineers working on teams, and they studied neuroscientists, and they were like, what do all these people that are able to hack into amazing levels of productivity and performance, and what do they have in common? And so they have made a study of it. They've created something called the Flow Genome Project. And they've created even an installation at Google. About 4 or 5 years ago, they housed a thing called the Flow Dojo. And it was a place where people could go to experience what would be life-threatening physical activities, but in a safe way. So they removed the danger, but they gave you the rush. How many of you have ever felt the kind of a physical rush of something that either it was because it was risky or because it was super intense? Like, this is why athletes like intensity. There's a certain state that happens. How many of you have had a taste of that particular state for yourself? And maybe it came through physicality, and maybe it came through meditation or mindfulness. How many of you have a practice, some kind of mindfulness practice? Okay, good. Or how about dance or music? Anybody can access it through dance and music? It's one of mine. I thought of, like, maybe we should just start dancing.
Yeah, I thought that was
like, get a dance thing and we could jump in. So I'm here to talk about two of my favorite subjects. And the first one is, how do we more consistently and more easily access a flow state in ourselves? And how do we build cultures in our teams and companies that help us do that? And to do that, I want to start actually with a little bit of a story about how I was preparing for this. Because first was like, come and talk at this thing. And I'm like, great, no problem, I talk all the time. And he says, oh, and we're going to have 5 cameras. And I'm like, oh, really? I love the idea of having, video later, but the idea of having 5 cameras, like I got people behind me, I got a person over here, I got a person here, I got a person up here. It was like really nerve-wracking as I was preparing for this. So I'm preparing for this, and I noticed that in my preparation for this, I had moments where I was just a mess. Like I was my self-critic was super loud, and it was a hard time staying focused, and it was hard, and I kept procrastinating and being distracted. And then there were moments when I lost track of time, and creativity was just flowing, and I got energized by it, and it was easy. And that's a flow state. So, so what I want you to do is find a partner. Everybody find a partner, turn to somebody next to you, and if you haven't met them already, you'll say hello in a moment. But here's what I want you to do. You can go ahead and stand up if you want, and if you have to move, that's okay. Use this to meet somebody new. Okay. And just for a moment, now that you've got your partner, I want you just to reflect for a moment. You could look down or close your eyes, but I want you just to remember a moment in the last month or two when you felt completely free of the inner critic, free of that incessant voice that's constantly commenting and narrating what you're doing and how you're doing it and whether it's good enough and what you're missing. And you had a moment of just pure, selfless, effortless, timeless attention. And it was easy. And whatever you were doing was happening. And you could have been playing a musical instrument. You could have been in a conversation with somebody without any self-consciousness. You could have just been focusing or writing. So just remember a moment. Remember what was happening in that moment. Okay? How many of you got something in that? Okay, good. Now, wipe that out. Remember another moment that was opposite of that. Oh. Shouldn't be too hard. It could have been 10 minutes ago. So just remember a moment that wasn't that. And now get with your partner and just share one thing that you do, that you know to do to get into a flow state is what? What's your way of accessing that? And then what's one thing you know about when it's not there? What's the major obstacle you have to having that be your state of mind when you're working or focusing? So go ahead, each other, maybe 30 seconds each, a minute each, go.
That time when I was surfing about 2 weeks ago.
I thought you were going to say surfing.
Paddleboard surfing. Yeah. And there's no issue.
Not around people. Yeah, nature.
Make sure you switch. Let the other person go. Both people.
I just I'm not really talking to anyone else, so take it away from the flow state. Yeah, probably now that you
All right, welcome back. So what are some of the things that you shared about? What has you easily get into a flow state? Just kind of yell them out. Yeah.
Being in the surf.
Being in the surf. Yeah, surfing. Good. What else?
Being with friends.
Being with friends. And what? Can be with friends. I can be with friends and be in a flow state, and I can also be with friends and not be in a flow state. So what's the difference maker?
Alcohol.
Right. Well, which is actually one of the things we're going to get to. I'm going to talk about what is a flow state. I'm going to talk about what gets in the way of flow states, and we're going to talk about how do we access them. And one of the ways we access them is through chemistry. We've all are on most of us are on some kind of psychostimulant right now called coffee, and then alcohol is another, plus others that are maybe less legal. So, but what's the quality of relating that happens with friendship or with coworkers that creates flow versus not? Anybody
Familiarity.
Sorry?
Familiarity.
Familiarity. And when we have familiarity, it makes possible something. Yeah?
Happiness.
happiness. Okay, so happiness is the result, or you feel happy.
Yeah, but the happiness makes me buzz, like, you know, that you're happy that you contribute or you gain something or you share something.
Yes, and what I'm noticing as you're speaking is your hands are going out like this, and what I'm imagining is that there's something, like there's an impacting each other. There's some way in which you're connecting. You're in
A dialogue or like a sharing.
Yeah, like you're in a shared moment, or you're having some kind of shared reality. So there's a way to be in relationship with each other that actually produces a flow state. And there's a way to be in relationship with each other that doesn't. And most of our social conditioning doesn't actually produce a flow state. It actually produces more self-consciousness. So let's talk a little bit about flow state. One of the 4 characteristics, how you know you're in one, is there's an acronym known as STER, S-T-E-R. All right, so first is selflessness. My critic goes offline. There's a technical term, it's called temporary hypofrontality. Wait, temporary, let me get this word right. STER, it's called transient hypofrontality, which basically means a depression in the functioning of your prefrontal cortex, which is the self-conscious part of us, the witness, the constant commenting on us. It temporarily goes offline. And when it does, it's pure bliss. It's when I get lost playing the piano. It's when we get into conversation and we lose track of time. It's when I have this experience of the moment that's undivided. Okay? T, timelessness. I know I'm in a flow state when I'm really present. I'm not in the future. I'm not in the past. I'm right here, right now, with you, and I'm able to take in more of what's happening. And that's the next one is that when I'm in a flow state, things are effortless. Like things are easy. And lastly, richness, R. My experience of life is just more rich. My things are more vivid, sounds sound better, feelings feel better. It's all kind of richer. Sunsets, beauty. Beauty is not lost on me. So this is how we know we're there. The question is, how do you access it? How do we? There's the go surfing, right? Like I can go surfing and I know it's reliable. I can go get into my basketball pickup game and I know that's reliable. But what about at work? How do I do it at work? I want to give you, how many of you want to do some experiential things? Okay, so are you up for some California woo-woo things? All right, cool. Brought to you from the capital of woo-woo. Here we go. It turns out, now that we have science on our side, all this woo-woo stuff from the hippie 60s is turning out to be really good ideas, and we're having the last laugh. So first is a very reliable, one of the most reliable ways to access a flow state is your breath. We're the only species that can control our breath. We can control, like, oh, I can breathe deeper, slower, faster, more. And most animals can't do that. They're just breathing. And our breath accesses the autonomic nervous system, which is the part of our nervous system that helps us relax and settle into a different place. So here's the breath that Dr. Andrew Weil recommends to help transform or shift your nervous system. And it's a 3-part, 4 counts in, 7 counts hold, 8 counts exhale. 4 counts in, 7 counts hold, 8 counts exhale. So in a moment, we're all going to do that, and I'm going to count like this, and then I'll say switch, and we're going to do this all together. We're all going to breathe together and do it to this count. You up for that? Yep. Cool. So sit, stand, doesn't matter, and start off by exhaling. Just get rid of any extra air. And inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold. And exhale to 8, 3, 4. Keep exhaling, 5, 6, 7. Exhale all of it. And in. 1. Hold. Exhale. Bigger the exhale, the bigger the inhale. And inhale. Hold. Exhale. In. Hold. Exhale. One more time. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. And just notice what it feels like to be you right now. What feels different? Anybody throw out a couple words, just what's different? Calm. What did you say? Nice. A more present, aware, centered, more relaxed. Amazing how a minute of breathing can shift our internal state. And really in the crazy world that we live in, and it's getting crazier, at least over where I am, it's getting crazy. I need everything I can get to stay centered. And pausing, taking a breath, is probably the easiest, most available, most reliable way for me to intervene in the kind of quality of my nervous system's functioning. Right? Here's number 2. So first one's breath. Number 2 is what's called the wide-angle vision. When I'm in a fight, flight, stress response, anxious, driven by time, worried, on to the next thing, moving really fast, feeling judged, feeling threatened, any kind of worry like that, there's a particular way that my brain likes to look through my eyes. And it's one of kind of what's called foveal vision. It's like I'm looking straight ahead. Imagine an animal that's like kind of ready, looking for the threat to come, and it has to be focused. And so the counterbalance to that is what's called wide-angle vision, which is shifting into your periphery. So to do this, I don't know if we could do this, but imagine, kind of stand up and get some room where you can put your arms out without hitting anybody. So you can come and fill the center here. Yeah, come in and come move up, and you can move to the side and back on the office. And then basically, so put your arms out and put them, your fingers up, and put them behind your eyes so you can't see them with your periphery. You're picking a spot forward on the wall or somewhere, and you're putting your fingers so you can't see them. And then while you're doing this, practice breathing. Do the breathing thing. Just let yourself breathe naturally. And now notice what it feels like to first just look straight ahead. And you can pick a person, just look at them. And then as you pick that spot or person, bring your finger slowly forward into your peripheral till you can just see them. And once you can see them, hold them there. And then relax. See your fingers. See what's in front of you. And they say that staying in your peripheral vision actually activates a different part of your nervous system in your brain. It's harder to judge. It's harder to feel judged. It's harder to feel scared. And if you're breathing at the same time, you're actually hacking your brain chemistry. And now put your hands down and keep the wide-angle vision. So notice what it feels like to just be paying attention, but also staying wide and feeling yourself. And you want to add the second one is feel your feet. Let your back be in its back, like versus forward. The stress fight response is kind of up and forward, so relax and back. And then while you're breathing, why not feel your heart? And you do all three of these things together, and you stay with it for about a minute. You've hacked your consciousness. Okay, so there's another one. Now, I'm going to give you one more. Are you interested in one more? All right, this one's relational, and this one's called the noticing game. Actually, I'll go here. I think it's the next slide. Great, I'm going to go here. This one's called the noticing game. And a lot of our interactions when we're talking to somebody are habitual, automatic, and there's this social groove we can get into that's pretty superficial. There's a difference between what I call an informational conversation, which is about something else. Like, let's talk about the weather, let's talk about our work, let's talk about whatever, something else that's not even here. Versus a personal conversation, let's talk about you, let's talk about me, and I'll share my stories and you share your stories. And that's a little more bonding and intimate. But there's a third level of conversation, and it's called a relational conversation, which is a conversation about what's happening right now between us. And so this is how it works. Can I have, Sabine, you're going to demonstrate this with me? So you're going to do what we do. So it's very simple. It starts off, being with you, I notice, and what comes in after that is one thing you're noticing in the present moment. You could be noticing a sensation. You could notice a feeling. You could notice a thought that you're having. One thing happening right now. Not a story, not a whole like da-da-da-da, no like because, no, like just keep it simple, one thing. And then she's going to respond with hearing that, like taking my words in, I notice. And she could notice something in herself, she could notice something in me, and then I do hearing that, and we go back and forth. We'll do that for about a minute and a half. And so we'll demonstrate a little bit so you get the sense. So you want to start or you want me to start?
Oh, you start.
Okay. So
I noticed that I'm...
yeah. Being with you, I notice in my periphery all these faces. And feeling stimulated by that.
Hearing that, I pick up on your slight and anxiety, not anxiety, but nervousness.
Hearing that, I just got a little more self-conscious about my anxiety.
Hearing that, I feel personally responsible.
Hearing that, I notice I like it when people laugh.
Hearing that, I notice I sink a bit more into my body and I'm feeling a bit more relaxed.
Yeah. So I'll pause there. So that's just that. Hearing that, one thing, we're keeping it in the present moment, in the present moment, in the present moment. Any questions?
Do we move on?
Yes, so I'm going to invite you to go find a new person, preferably find someone you've never even met before. Just go ahead and find them, say hello, meet them, stand across from each other. I'll ring a bell to get your attention, and then we'll start the game. And we'll go for about a minute or a minute and a half. Okay? Yeah. Go ahead. Okay. Thank you. That was awesome. You did a great job. You did a great job.
I thought before our other one was probably better because it was more of a positive feeling into it.
Yeah. Okay.
15 minutes.
Thank you. 15 minutes left. Okay. So what time is it?
It's 8 o'clock.
Thank you. Okay, so just come back into the moment. So now that you've met each other, I want you to actually, this game is best played very slowly. So let yourself actually get present with yourself and feel like in this moment, what are you actually experiencing? like this is a meditation practice, except you're doing it with another person. And then start. And person who's going to go first, raise your hand. Just pick yourself. If you know you're going first, you go first. Great. And you're starting out with being with you, I notice. And then their response is, hearing that, I notice. And we'll go for about a minute and a half. Ready, set, go. All right. Cool. All right, thank your partner. Thank them. Quick shares. What did you notice about playing the noticing game? Hard. What's hard about it? Having to make, to be present with somebody. Yeah. Yeah. It is quite intimate. And who else found that? Like, wow, this feels very like, wow, I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm actually getting really real with what's happening.
The idea where social barriers.
Yeah.
A lot of social barriers.
Yeah. And this is something that breaks them down. So there's a huge amount of these kind of exercises that are happening in businesses right now. People are bringing this kind of relational intelligence and these relational practices, with this is just one of them. There's another one called the curiosity game. There's another one that it's like this portable way to smuggle in new ways of relating to each other that are quick, efficient, and get us right dropped into the best part of ourselves. And so I want to shift a little bit and talk about I get to this, just kind of quick different ways to access flow. We've just experienced one, right? This relational way. We've experienced another one with the breath and the peripheral vision. So your body and mindfulness is a way to do that. Then there's all those physical things we can do, literally changing your posture, exercising, movement, dance, music, put on a song that reliably, I have teams and companies that take dance breaks every day after lunch at 1:30. They put on 5 minutes of everybody takes turns choosing the music. The whole office stops and they all dance for 5 minutes in the middle of the day. I know teams and leaders that will initiate a 10-minute kind of pause break. There are companies in Silicon Valley that have nap pods in their workplaces where people can go, put up, the thing closes. It looks like a space-age nest, and it just has a timer, and you just go in, and it's completely sound-proof, and you just rest, and it has music, and it's like being in a spa for however many minutes you set it for, and you come out refreshed. So there's all sorts of ways we can hack into that, including technology, gadgets, health tech things. I have an app. How many of you have an app on your phone that is actually good for your flow state? And it's not Facebook. It's not that one. But like, what are some of the ones you have that are good? Headspace. What else? Calm. Good one, right? I have one called Mind Jogger, and it just randomly sends me a message saying, like, asks me a question, or what are you grateful for right now? 10 times a day. Nothing. Okay, fine, I'll find something, right? So I have another one that's a heart math app, which does a 5-minute thing where it's a biofeedback loop. I hook a thing on my ear, and I breathe, and it helps me adjust my breathing to get into a certain alpha state. But then there's one more, and I think people kind of want to hear about this one. This is the chemistry side of it. So everything from coffee to nootropics to off-label pharmaceuticals to the more illicit things. A year ago, there was a meetup in San Francisco called consciousness hacking, started by Mikey Siegel. And they had a speaker that was going to talk about microdosing LSD, and 1,000 people showed up at this meetup. They had to get a huge hall because so many people were doing that. What's Burning Man? Burning Man is a highly experimental place where people go, and yes, it's a big party, but what they're finding is that if you take some of those same psychoactive substances and you do them in very small amounts, like a 1/10, a 20th, they become cognitive enhancers and they help us access parts of our brains that we don't normally. I know teams that actually do everything from, we're doing a creative retreat, we'll do a microdose of LSD or psilocybin, and then I also know teams that do full-on ayahuasca journeys together as their annual retreat. Like, these things are happening. I'm not here to say that they're legal, because they're not. I'm not saying I do any of those things in front of 4 cameras, but I know they're happening, and I know they have great benefit. You know, why do they do? They get us into the expansive part of our brains. They get us into this place of seeing, kind of making interconnections between things, one of gratitude, one of expansiveness. It's been said that the person who discovered the double helix, Crick, Dr. Crick, was experimenting with LSD when he actually saw the model. There's a lot of science that has been forwarded by people experimenting with that. So enough said about that. If you have questions about that, I can answer more of those in the Q&A or afterwards. But here's the place I want to go now, is I want to talk about culture. So I work with a group called Evolution, and we specialize working with high-growth companies that don't want to lose their soul as they scale. And how many of you are in a role where you are actively influencing and care about influencing the culture of a team or a company? Okay. In my world, you're all culture builders, and you just maybe haven't yet chosen the group. Feels like culture is really hot right now. Is it hot here? Like in the Bay Area, everybody's talking about culture. And it wasn't like that 40 years ago. 40, 50 years ago, maybe a few books were written about it, and they were academic. And now there's just conferences every month and books being written. It feels like what's happening to culture now is like what happened to leadership in the 70s and 80s and 90s. I don't know if you remember, but back in the 50s and 60s, if you read a book on leadership, it was really about the leader. Leadership was reserved for that 1 or 2 or 5 special people that had the status and the role, the head of the whole company, the head of the military, the head of the organization, and then there was everybody else. And then something happened, Warren Bennis and Tom Peters and all these, like, leadership is a behavior and an act, and everybody can be a leader, and now leadership programs are everywhere. If you aren't cultivating leadership in a company now, you are way behind. And I think that's what's happening with culture. In culture now, we have, all B certifications and conscious capitalism and all sorts of, 100 best places to work and the Gallup polls and the summits and all sorts of, I imagine you have your own versions here of things that are tracking culture, and this is the best company to work for. And then what happened is, like, companies started, moved from ignoring culture to going to culture. We have to do culture because it's good PR. So we get our values and we put it up on the wall, and then we go through that phase. And then you ask, like, well, what's your culture? And you go, oh, this is our culture, right? It's these values, just right up here. That's our culture. Never mind what I'm doing right now, or how I treat my employees, or how I work with my team, or how I am in a crisis. But that's my culture. And there is this division between what we say and what we do. And what's happening now, and I imagine it's starting to happen here too, but in the Bay Area it's really happening. You've got leaders that are starting to take very seriously what it means to embody our cultural values, day to day, in and out. Like, it's not just about a future state, it's that we aspire to, and then we go to sleep. It's about how do we live this every day, and we know that we never get there. Culture is both an aspiration and a daily practice. And we're constantly giving ourselves feedback. And the cultures that are really awesome are the ones where there's the freedom to point out the moments when we're not doing it and have it not be a problem. Those are the ones that are doing well. And one of the things that's driving this even more, things like Glassdoor. How many familiar with Glassdoor? Right, in the US, it's like a Yelp site for employees where they give anonymous, transparent feedback to their employees. And some of them are just people sour grapes after they leave and they're mad, and so they put on a thing. But a lot of them are, where you get the average out and you throw away the bottom and the top, you get a rating which employers take very seriously. And so where am I going now on this? I want to give you some examples of what companies are doing. Well, here's what happens when you don't attend to culture. You put up some values to get some good employees, and you have like this great expansion. And then you get this like toxic thing. Our company reached out to them, wrote a letter to the board 4 years ago and said, hey, culture, do something. And they didn't until things got really bad. There are some amazing leaders doing some amazing things with culture, and I want to give you some examples of what companies are doing to make flow state individually, collectively, and within the organization more likely. Let's look at Google. Google started 5, 6, 7 years ago the GPause movement. Anybody familiar with GPause? So GPause is the people in Google, of the 80,000 employees, 5% of those, that's 4,000 people, have committed to a meditation practice, and they meditate together. There are actually dedicated rooms in every office around the world, 70 of them, where people meditate at the same time together for 15 to 30 minutes. And so you have a good portion of employees dipping back into a flow state. Also at Google, they've created 2-minute visualization meditations to start meetings. Hey, before we start this meeting, everybody just take a moment. First, get present with yourself. Let go of whatever you were stressed about a moment ago, and then start to put your attention on who's in the room. And let's look at what is the work we have to do together, and what's the purpose that we share, and what are we hoping to accomplish here, and let's all kind of spend a minute or 2 minutes just getting present to that. And any team can just use that, press play, and they start their meetings like that. Dropbox brings in actors from Second City to lead improvisational games to help people get into creative flow states with Yes and. Asana has every employee, they have about 300 employees, and they're growing by another 100 this year. They have every employee go through a program called 15 Commitments to Conscious Leadership. And anybody have heard of the Conscious Leadership? So the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership is a blueprint for staying in a flow state. I can't recommend that book highly enough. A group of coaches out of California, but it's basically saying there are 2 states of consciousness you can be in any given moment, and one is in your stress, fight, flight, reactive brain, and the other is open, present, learning, available. And I'm either in one or the other. And we go back and forth, and the hypothesis is most of us spend most of our time in the reactive one. And it's not surprising. Look at the world we live in. Look at how fast information is hitting us. Look how busy we schedule ourselves. Like, one way to stay out of a flow state is to not give yourself transition time. To not schedule, transitions are probably one of the most important things you can manage in your day. Do you schedule your meetings to end on the hour and then start on the hour, or do you give yourself 5 or 10 minutes? Do you give yourself breaks in the middle of the day to decompress and recompress? Right, so they teach everybody that. It's Slack. They give everybody a $2,500 budget. We're talking 1,000 employees, do the math, to spend on whatever they want to help their own personal development. Anything they want. Here's the money, go. The entire building, these places, LinkedIn, I love LinkedIn story. LinkedIn has jam rooms with musical instruments and soundproofing in their buildings, and they encourage everybody to form their own rock bands, and it doesn't matter if you know how to play music. And then they have days where the whole company gets together, and employees perform their one song that they've been practicing in their rock band, because they know that when people get together to play music together, they have to listen, they have to groove, and there's all this chemistry that happens in their brains that's really good for productivity and creativity. So these are some of the things that are happening where I am. I'm curious to know what's happening here. Like, what are y'all, like, what are you doing, or what are you hearing about that's happening that's helping people access flow states culturally, team-wise, individually, organizationally? Okay, so very little. You can't think of anything. Who else? All right, you got something?
Yes, we work with organizations across New Zealand, and one of the things that we're really passionate about is the conscious leadership movement. So we use a lot of the resources from the conscious leadership group that you just referenced.
Yeah.
So that above and below the line is something that we are bringing to people's consciousness in terms that there is a line and that you can be deliberate about where you want to be. So we are also integrating a lot of mindfulness and meditation and being present and mindful listening and all of that good stuff into the more edgier leadership stuff that we are rolling out in organizations. So there's a big awakening here in New Zealand. We're not too, I mean, we're not as far as the Bay Area, of course, but we're definitely on the road, we feel.
Yeah. Good. What other tools or things that are you noticing?
I just ran a 2-day workshop for an executive team up at Parkery, and we did yoga on the second morning, which was fascinating to hear all the apprehension the night before.
About doing the yoga?
I was quite surprised by it, yeah. And we introduced meditation throughout the day as well, especially after sessions. There's been a lot of emotion, just to bring it back down.
Yeah. Good. It's like yoga, getting in our bodies, going to beautiful places, right? Spacious time. What else?
Southern Cross has got an amazing wellbeing program implemented. I think that's pretty world class what you're doing.
We have, but I'm sort of thinking about this flow and yeah, could do better.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can't force flow, but we can create the conditions for it to be much more likely. And the thing that gets us out of flow the most is rushing. Is like this constant busyness, rushing. Like if we're constantly not in this moment together, where flow is not available to me. And so, like, number one thing is this: can we slow down and just be here and give ourselves transition time and use things like the conscious leadership above below the line model, which is fantastic. It's like so well written and clear. Yeah. Good. Can we pause at the beginning of meetings? Can we even do a check-in to see just like where are you at? Like one word. Big fan of sentence stems. Using quick, like I give a sentence and it's just a quick way to get somebody's voice in the room, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time. So I want to, Kat?
I was curious about this. I think you mentioned one of them doing 45-minute meetings instead of an hour meeting. Have you experienced that? Like, would that have a big impact?
Becoming much more standard now.
Right.
It's becoming like scheduling to the hour.
Yeah, the
45.
hour thing's really ingrained, isn't it? So that 45 minutes could be...
Yeah, there's some law that says you're going to use the time that you schedule. So challenge yourself to schedule, just do 45. Yeah. So I want to open it up to questions. I have some time here. Like any comments or questions on anything I've discussed I can go deeper into before I... Yeah, here and then here.
So I run a co-working space, and I'm thinking about all the things that you said that some of the companies and Stanford are implementing. And I'm just thinking, even in my own head, like how do you remove some of the barriers to get people to even be open to the idea of doing some of these things? Because I think that's a big issue, especially in New Zealand in general versus some places in the States where it's just there's not a lot of people doing stuff like this. Like I've read the book and I appreciate how powerful and how beneficial it is. And like one stat I come back to is that top executives are 500% more effective when they're in states of flow versus not. So that kind of thing is easy to articulate, and it's like you can see the power of that. But that's just one sentence. So how do you get people to appreciate the power of all of this?
I think there's a lot of social proof available now to make the case. So the quote you just made, the science behind mindfulness and focus, the science behind, if you look at like what the military is doing, to help elite teams. What sports teams are doing to help elite athletes. What they're calling it resilience training, right? So they use different language. So if you call it mindfulness, you're going to turn off a whole proportion of the population. But if you call it resilience, it's the same thing. You're going to include a lot more people. So I think language is important, and I think kind of making the case for we've now transitioned from this is a woo-woo hippie thing into look, the science actually supports this. 40% of US companies have some sort of mindfulness effort internal in their company. Like we're across the chasm into an emerging trend now, and it's becoming more widely adopted.
So what's like one example of one thing you can do to start introducing this stuff? Because I think me in general, in contrast to some other companies, like we don't have team meetings, right? Like we run a co-working space with entrepreneurs doing their own thing, so people have the option of opting out of anything.
Right.
And so it's like, how do you present it and get people to opt in?
I think giving people an experience, like inviting people into one experience that's short enough and gets them to have a reference experience of, oh, that was good. We did a thing, everybody did a little quick check-in with a word, and we did a paired thing that lasted 2 minutes, and then we went on our way. And I felt more energized when I left. I'll do that again. I think kind of speaking of experience. You had something.
I just wondered, so there's obviously these, I would have thought these organisations are front of the pack kind of, advocates of this stuff. Where's the actual market in your part of the world? Is this kind of thinking and leadership and practices widely adopted now? I mean, if I walked into just a run-of-the-mill manufacturing company, people would be kind of talking this language and using these practices, or is it still?
No, I think I'm definitely representing the leading edge of it.
Yeah.
But there's something happening. It's kind of my next slide. I'm gonna show it there. It's accelerating, right? I feel like we're in a moment right now where we're in this unprecedented petri dish, right, of things overlapping. Right? You've got, again, I'll just speak of the Bay Area for a moment, but you've got 7 million people, all culturally really diverse. The companies there have attracted some of the brightest, engineers and scientists and researchers and creatives, and they're working for companies that are working on cutting edge technology. And you've got more consciousness happening as well. So like there's more mindfulness and more, and then you've got free floating wealth in the hands of young millennials who have a social purpose and want to make a difference. And then you have them all networked together. And it's like this stew that's like, and I think the networking part includes all the other parts of the world. Like we're all like a global community now, and
we're a petri dish.
It's accelerating. Like talk about culture, right? We're accelerating. Something's accelerating. Like, this feels bigger than the Renaissance. It feels bigger than the Enlightenment. It feels like there is something happening right now, and there's a shift in consciousness happening where a lot of people are finally waking up that what I'm calling the me to we shift, right? It's like, it's not just in America, it's like rugged individualism. It's like, we're like now coming back to there's a way to do we, there's a way to do community, there's a way to do a collective purpose that isn't communism, that isn't, that's like there's a different way to do that. That's me and we, not we instead of me, which was the first round of it. And while not every run-of-the-mill manufacturing company is going to be up on this slide, they're starting to hear it because they have to compete for the talent. And the talent competition is driving people to innovate. And if you're not offering some, if you're not offering some of these things, you don't get the talent. So.
This is Stella. Stella.
Good. Other questions? I don't have time. I don't know how much. Oh, good. I'll take one more. There's one more, and then I have a couple.
5 more minutes.
Yeah. 5 more minutes. Great. Yeah.
I've got one. Do we then create, say we, because I think we're all conscious when we shop, when we do our daily business, whatever, do we then also create an elitist group of people who are aware that there's more to become aware of? And where are the others? Are they left behind? Are they, what's happening there?
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. So that if we acknowledge that there is more consciousness and less consciousness, right? There's more capacity and less capacity, and that we each have available to us to reach for more capacity, then there's, oh wow, I have more capacity, I have less capacity. I hear the fear, and I can see the path that can go down as like another thing to divide. But I also know that I have both of those in me. I have more consciousness and less consciousness right here in me. Every single moment, every single day, I have this range. And I actually think the world needs us to bring our best self. I think the world needs us to be in flow as much as possible. I think, and not just alone, but together. And so whatever impact there might be in that, like, oh, there's this new thing emerging where we've got more or less, I think it's worth transcending that and doing it anyway. Because there's a lot, never before have we had the possibilities we have now, and never before have we needed it more.
I would not question that we should do it. We should do it with a blunt force, with love and force and everything mixed together. But
Nice.
The thing is just that I feel that it will take so long for a lot of those people, because of apprehension, to actually say, oh, that's a thought. It's a bit like going organic, It took forever, I think, for people to think that it's not a fad, it's not something somebody's invented to scare you off some farming or farm products or something if we're a farming country. It takes so long. So that divide can make those who are onto it have a much, much better life, and those who are not, they don't get those chances. They don't get to work for Asana, they don't get to work for Google, those who don't want to see or can't see it.
Well, you go ahead, you have a response to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's happening in our schools, so it's happening from, the young age up as well, so I don't feel that the gap's going to be that big. There's also a group that I did some work with a year or so ago that are introducing mindfulness to prisons around the world. So, and they did some studies around the impact that was having, not just on the violence in prisons and the depression and mental health, but on the prisoners' families as well, because they're changing how they're speaking to them and interacting with them. So I think there's a lot of work being done in lots of different pockets. Yeah. So.
And recognising, there's a distribution curve of this stuff. There'll be some people in the population that, for whatever reason, will just never connect with that stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's...
And I actually have something to add to that. It's not that they may not connect to this stuff, what we're talking about here, but there's a next step for everybody. Everybody has a next step. There's a great model called spiral dynamics, Ken Wilber, integral theory, which talks about stages of evolutionary development. All cultures, all people, all species, all systems go through these stages. And there's a system that goes from, we're a system about process and rules and laws and nation states and cities, and that's a whole world that but then gives way to, individual freedom and science and numbers, and we don't just believe it because the central authority says so, but we believe it because there's data. But then there's a whole shift into people being mattering, and values mattering, and how I impact you mattering, and egalitarianism mattering, and that's a whole stage that comes from this business libertarian science view that then eventually gives way to what we've been talking about today, which is, consciousness, embodiment, both and, not either or. And so everybody has their step. And I just downloaded this book on Audible by Kevin Hart, comedian in a bunch of movies. I can't make this thing up, and I'm like listening to him. This guy is talking about personal responsibility and all these things to a group of people that are going to be able to access these insights because he's just bringing it through his stories. And I'm like, I'm sending it to my son-in-law, and I'm sending it to and it's like, so there's stuff, it's getting out there. And I'm optimistic. Yeah.
I was going to say, not all large organisations in New Zealand, but I think what we're noticing is that everybody's very heavily focused on new ways of working, which is all around generally system implementation. but there's not a lot of organisations who are talking about new ways of thinking to support the new ways of working. And I think when we look at everybody's doing agile, everybody's changing the way that they're working, but there isn't that many organisations on a large scale that are now looking at different ways of thinking to support that.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, how do you start that journey of them changing the focus to just new ways of working and new ways of thinking?
It starts by slowing down and getting present. So there's this fundamental shift called the object-subject shift. Once I become aware of myself as an object versus I am just doing what I'm doing, having my reactions, we're all just doing what we're doing, bouncing off each other. As soon as I bring some awareness and go, oh, I'm breathing. Oh, I just was really shitty with that person. Oh, the way we just had that meeting really didn't work very well. Like when we start to see ourselves, then we can start having conversations about how to do it better. And so and that takes, let's take moments to debrief what's happening. Like explicit, planned, consistent. We just finished a meeting, let's spend 5 minutes, what worked, what didn't work, how can we do it better? And it's us going meta on ourselves. The more we can go meta on ourselves, the more it encourages that consciousness. The more we encourage that consciousness, the more people step into it. The more people step into it, the more not only the way we work changes, but how we do that, and it becomes more like the learning cycles hasten. The learning loop completes when we jump out of ourselves, review what we did critically, learn something, and then go back in with the new learnings. And the more if we do that just once a year at a performance evaluation, we're not learning very quickly, right? So we're going to do it constantly, and it's more fun. So I want to end with, I've just recently finished a manifesto for culture builders, and this has been the culmination of 20 years, 5 years of my heart and what it feels about this moment we're in, and what I feel is important about being a culture builder right now. So I want to read that as my close, and thank you for your good attention. So it goes like this. Whereas culture has been the neglected dimension of business until now. Humans are wired to react fearfully to uncertainty, stress, and perceived threats. Work environments are full of uncertainty, stress, and perceived threats. And this is a recipe for mediocre default culture unless we design ways to thrive. Default culture at work is expensive. It wastes our time, our energy, and our creativity. Business as usual is unacceptable. Whereas work is not separate from life. When over half our waking hours are spent working, how we experience work is precious, it's important, and it's worthy of our attention. The best and the brightest do not want to work in mediocre companies, and the world doesn't need another sucky team. So let's change the game. Let's change the game from being consumers of culture to being co-creators of it, from a circumstance in which culture happens to us to one where we shape it. Calling all culture builders. This is an invitation to you, influencers, managers, leaders, change agents, to step into the role of being a culture builder. Culture building happens every day. It's not just an HR thing or an executive thing, it's an everyone thing. Culture builders are conversation builders. Pay attention to and improve the quality of your conversations. Culture builders are psychobiological social regulators. Create environments that help human brains be less reactive and more resourceful. Start with you. Culture builders value learning. The quicker the learning cycle, the faster we innovate, iterate, and evolve. The world needs people who can metabolize the pettiness, the messiness, the competing agendas without collapsing. We need people like you to rise above, untangle the mess, and create shared values we can all embrace. No special degree needed, nobody's permission required, just authorize yourself and get started. Intentionally build the culture of teams and groups around you and start learning how. Nobody is going to come rescue the culture of your team except maybe you. Go ahead, start now, unsuck the workplace.